afternoon, everyone. Next generation meteorologist Joe Shock here with the Fiona 98L update. We certainly have a lot going on in the tropics, given it is the peak of the season. So this is certainly no surprise for September 22nd, 2022. Not going to talk about Gaston and not going to talk about these two areas here in the East Atlantic. We certainly have more than enough going on today. Today's slide was 23 images, so certainly quite lengthy, so don't want to take this for too long, but certainly we have more than enough to deal with Fiona and 98L as it is. So let's start a quick look at the cloud shot. Obviously, here's Fiona to the southwest of Bermuda, which is right here. Here is 98L, just a little bit north of South America and Venezuela, south of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Right around here, we have a nice little low-level center beginning to develop, and now it's going to propagate off to the west, northwest, and then northwest as the next several days go on. So we'll take a quick look here at the background state of the atmosphere, which is always how I like to set these up, because it definitely, start big and then build into the center, and that's exactly what I like to do. Definitely, I think it's helpful. I'm not sure how many other people do this approach, but whatever. It's my own special sauce, how I like to handle this. So here's the European. On the MJO, you can see pretty much in an old phase. Going to try to squeak out the phases probably 4 and 5 by the first week of October. And the JMA, same kind of thing in an old phase, and then tries to squeak out maybe in the phase 3 and 4 by the turn of the month. Now, phase 2, 3, 4, and 5 do favor tropical development, which is going on. But however, since we're not really in any of these MJO phases, you're not having 3 major hurricanes at once, you're just having one. So certainly being in the null phase of the MJO, where there is no MJO present, is certainly keeping a lid on the hurricanes globally. But you can see if we do approach into phase 3, 4, and 5, you can see it does favor the area that I am looking at for 98L, especially phase 3, if that really manifests itself. And if we just stay in the null phase, we stay in the null phase and we just deal with the storm, looking at other things besides the MJO. Speaking of other things, here are the ocean temperature anomalies, and you can see they are quite warm where 98L is, quite warm where Fiona is and will be going. You can see where Fiona has cooled here north of the Caribbean, and there's Earl's cooling over the last couple of weeks there, so you can see where the ocean is cooled just a little bit. But once Fiona gets into the North Atlantic, Northwest Atlantic and North Atlantic, there's going to be a lot of cooling, I do believe, that is going to go on with all these waves that are about to be generated as this Category 3, 4 hurricane gets up to 40 north and up to 41, 42 north as the weekend goes on. But certainly 98L down here, untouched, undisturbed water, so plenty of fuel for that to work with as the upper level pattern gets ready to cooperate big time late next week, late this week and into much of next week. Here are the ocean temperatures. You can certainly see all of this area up here, 80 degrees or warmer, so certainly plenty of fuel for Fiona, which is going to become a hybrid once it leaves the 80-degree water and will be tapping into upper-level jet dynamics. That is why Fiona and all tropical storms that get up to this, tropical cyclones, not storms, but I guess tropical storms, but, cyclones in general, once they get up to this latitude, usually north of 40 north, 37, 38 north, they get interacting with, the westerly winds. And in Fiona's case, you're going to get a trough phase, which you'll see in just a moment. So the energy will not be solely rely on water, but Fiona's energy source will be still off the warm water, above normal as you saw, but it will transition into a hybrid storm. So that means that its energy source will be coming from the jet dynamics, not all the ocean. So that is the difference between purely tropical cyclones and hybrid storms. One of the differences, but certainly going to be a historic storm for eastern Newfoundland here on northeastern Nova Scotia, particularly here in the island. Some of these islands up here are probably going to come in the mid and upper 920s for surface pressure. Gusts to 100 to 120 miles an hour seem very, very likely tomorrow night into the day, Saturday, and possibly even into the day Sunday as it slowly weakens, crawling northward. So certainly a major historic event for that part of the world. And meanwhile, 98L, rocking in mid and upper 80 water temperatures for the foreseeable future. So once the wind shear dies down a little bit from Fiona and some other disturbances in the tropics, 98L should rapidly intensify this weekend and early next week. Plenty of ocean heat content as well, obviously, for 98L, and very good ocean heat content even up here again, up to 40 north, as Fiona will be traveling right straight up, and all that ocean heat content, even though it's not 100 units or 150, 175 like where 98L is going to be passing over. It's certainly, even a little speckle here, roughly around 50, and even some of these little loops up here up around 25. So that is still very, very high ocean heat content for this far north up in the basin. So overall, still a very charged situation in the tropics, to say the least. And again, there's a quick track look at the Fiona there on the European for this week. Now, let's look at the JMA for the next one that's coming across, 98L. You can see the vertical velocity pattern here. You can see pretty favorable here on the Caribbean and off the southeast coast. And look at that. You can see the JMA seeing the heavy rainfall from Cuba up to Florida and then bending northeast. There's Fiona still showing her prevalence and the modeling right there with its heavy precip. And there's the trough split that's going to be occurring over the next week or so as Fiona lifts up. Another trough digs in and amplifies and then splits off late next week. And I think it's going to capture this feature coming through. And here's week 2. You can see the enhanced precipitation up the east coast. And there's the ridge over troubled water with the trough split occurring at this time, and the threat of a 98L trying to run from Florida to Massachusetts, or southern New England in general. But Florida up to southern New England is a decent shot at the moment. And you can see how the European model has been verifying with the tracks, and pretty good verification so far from the European. This is from UAlbany, Brian Tang. He is a professor over there, a meteorology professor who runs some verification products. So we thank him very much for making these products available. Definitely helps me verify these models and see exactly how they're doing with particular setups. And here's the European operational. You can see its verification there, actually doing a very good job there as well. You can definitely see that bend off to the northeast in the longer term. Here's the European ensemble, same kind of thing. Here's the verifications in the ensemble members in pink, the probabilities and the various shadings here that he has. And again, there's the track so far and the verifications there with the black X's, and there's some ensemble means in here as well that he has plotted with the ellipses, which is pretty cool. And he does these plots every 24 hours through 7 days. The ensemble, it looks like he must run through at least 10, 11 days, given some of the other products that I've seen, but you can certainly see the projection along and up the East Coast, and you'll see another example of that from Weather Nerds. Hey, right here. And here's another example of that here, but again, plotted here. Now, I've noticed that on some of these sites, the ensemble, at least the way they plot these, they don't come in off the same time. You can see when this was plotted, you can only see one member crossing New England there. But again, here you can see numerous members crossing southern New England, so I think it's definitely a way how these are plotted at various sites. But you can clearly see here the ensembles, Cuba being a threat, Florida, and then we'll see what happens down the road here north of Florida. This is a credible threat down the road, but certainly something to look at for Cuba and Florida as of now. And all this we'll worry about early next week, probably by Sunday or Monday. We'll worry about what happens, after this. But you can certainly see, even in a week from now, this thing it still may be in Florida. You can see the hours here as well, timestamp. So this, how fast this is moving was. So you can see maybe in a week from now, it's still trying to come up through Florida, or maybe a week from now, it's coming up to southern New England. But certainly, I would favor the lower forward motion with this, given the overall pattern that seems to be setting up. I don't think this thing's going to be moving this fast. But still, again, you can see what some of the ensemble members look, even past a week. There's plenty of them that bring it over eastern, southern New England in about 7 to 9 days or so. So we'll see how this evolves, but certainly a very interesting situation, again, with that large-scale trough that's going to be digging in, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. And again, here's the GFS modeling more off to the south and west, but catching on to the northeast turn, as you can see here in the verifications. It is beginning to see that bend off to the east and northeast down the road. The GFS ensembles, of course, look like this, and we'll see how that verifies as the next couple of days go on, as new guidance comes in. But you can see what that looks like there. Now, European versus the GFS 500. You can see, obviously, Fiona's up here in southern Canada now. This is a valid Saturday evening, 8 p.m. So there's the European. GFS, also note 98L's Um, here with the closed contour here at 500 millibars, its prevalence here. And you can see the overall steering, relatively weak steering at this time. So if we march out here to Monday, here's the European. Now this is where the differences really become quite noticeable. You can see the European mean has it now near Western Cuba. The GFS is further southwest, closer to the Yucatan. So European, GFS. European, GFS. And you also notice a trough position. The European has a trough hanging back a little further west, while the GFS is a little bit further east. And also the GFS does have progressive biases with troughs, so this might continue to back up even further as we get closer in early next week. European, now this is a middle next week, next Wednesday, you can see the trough here in the east, how the trough is weakening, de-amplifying, beginning to split. The ridging comes back crazy in the western and northern Atlantic. Here is 98L somewhere around Florida, so there's the European, the GFS. You can clearly see the difference there. European, GFS, there's that more progressive trough on the GFS. There's the system further off to the southwest, and there's the European. So you can definitely see the differences there between the European and GFS. Then I got one more. I thought I had one more. Maybe I didn't put it on, but I think this is a good place to start now anyway. Next Wednesday, roughly, 5-6 days away. So I think that's a good stopping point for now. Let's just get this thing developing up into the Central Caribbean before we go any further. But overall, you can see certainly the differences as we go through the weekend and early next week of how the upper level pattern evolves. So definitely an interesting situation for sure. Historic storm for southern Canada this weekend. So hopefully any one of my viewers who is up in that part of Canada is staying safe and is prepared to deal with what is going to be an historic storm late tomorrow night in through the day Sunday and into early next week as it continues to lift further north into Labrador in this part of the Atlantic Basin and in Canada. So that is all I have for now, and thank you for watching.